Turks, Cenk Uygur, epic politics man Michael Shure's here today. And the stories are not exactly political, but they lead to politics since it involves the leading presidential candidate, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, they're pretty political.
Yeah. Disastrous poll numbers on Trump. That's not even in the show, but I'll sprinkle it in. But even worse ones for Biden. So, all right, fun for everybody. We have a missing submarine. We will get to that. And Apple has decided to sue everyone who makes apples.
Or Johnny Appleseed.
That's right. Yeah. So that's later in the program. But now we bring you the most important villain in politics, Hunter Biden.
That's right, the hunted. Yeah, Hunter Biden finally reached a plea deal with the Justice Department, and this is exactly the kind of divisive political story you'd expect to get here. After a years-long investigation into crimes, he was charged with 2 counts of willfully failing to pay federal income taxes on time, and unlawful possession of a gun. Unlawful because when you are an addict or in trouble with drugs, you are not allowed to have a firearm. In this agreement, which some are decrying and others are saying nothing about, we can learn here, under a deal hashed out over several months by Hunter Biden's legal team and federal prosecutors, he will plead guilty to misdemeanor counts of failing to pay his 2017 and 2018 taxes on time and agree to probation, the court filing said. According to the indictment, in both 2017 and 2018, he had taxable income in excess of $1.5 million, but failed to pay income tax for each of those years. Hunter owed the IRS more than $100,000 in taxes for each of those years, according to the filing. And so in 2022, Hunter Biden paid those taxes back. He, as tax cheats or tax laggards do, will have to pay penalties for that. And when it comes to the gun charge, a little differently, the information on the gun charge says that during an 11-day period in October of 2018, Hunter possessed a Colt Cobra .38 caliber revolver, despite knowing he was an unlawful user and addicted to a controlled substance. As we mentioned before, Hunter Biden has agreed to enter into a so-called pretrial diversion agreement in connection with the federal felony charge of possession of a gun by a person who is a user or addict of illegal drugs. Typically, such agreements call for the related criminal charge to be dismissed if a defendant complies with the conditions of the deal for a set period of time. So another way of putting this, Cenk, is that the Justice Department is charging Hunter Biden here, but they're not prosecuting him in connection with his purchase of the handgun.
Yeah, I mean, well, it depends on how you define it. They're prosecuting he's just not going to go to jail. He's going to get probation and other sentences, right? So look, there's a lot of takeaways here. Number one, I guess this ends the Hunter for Red October. This was all political in the first place. But it had a potential of being a real crime because, and we've said this all along, so Hunter Biden using his name to get these contracts with foreign companies and being on their boards is cheesy to know and potentially corrupt. And so we went over the laptop material earlier in the program, when that first came out, and we showed you there's a lot of damaging things about Hunter Biden on those laptops. But it's actually exculpatory of Joe Biden because on the laptops they talk about how they can't promise the big guy will do anything because he won't. So it actually showed that Joe Biden is innocent. So now they do this long investigation of Hunter Biden, and I got a totally open mind. Maybe there was something crooked, etc. Now the good news here for everybody who cares about the truth is, and this is a funny thing for me to say, but the prosecutor in this case was Trump appointed. That's right. And Merrick Garland, when he came in, replace all the attorneys general, or U.S. attorneys, I should say, as he's supposed to do. You replace the Republicans with the Democrats, except this one. He left this one alone, saying you continue your investigation unabated, okay? And he did. So, look,
and Garland said that David Weiss, this prosecutor, had total and complete authority to run this case as the Trump-appointed prosecutor.
And so, look, for MAGA, nothing matters. Facts don't matter. We'll come back to them in a second. But for, by the way, establishment Democrats, a lot of them, the facts don't matter. They were going to defend the Biden family no matter what. Okay, that's, I think, a much smaller sliver, but that exists, right? But for the rest of us, including me, I actually wanted to know. So if you'd given me a Biden-appointed prosecutor, I would have trusted that less. Why? Because of politics? No, not really. It's just because Democratic appointed prosecutors generally are much weaker and softer, and especially among people in the elites. That's my opinion. You could agree or disagree, okay? But here's a Trump appointed prosecutor, looks after it for years and years, tries to get the guy. And these charges are the weakest I have ever seen related to anyone related to politics, ever. I mean, I don't think these should be tried or charged if you're a regular person.
Well,
okay?
we'll get to that, because that's exactly right. I mean, it's common that people are charged for these things. It is not an uncommon charge to have tax evasion or failure to pay or to delay charged, but not prosecuted. You have to pay your taxes in America, so that's why. But he's also not, he's related to the president, but he's not a politician either, Hunter Biden. So we got to be careful. Let me just go to the gun thing quickly. One thing, the gun part of this in the deal would be contingent on Mr. Biden, Hunter Biden, remaining drug-free for 24 months and agreeing never to own a firearm again. So these are things that will be monitored in whatever way they're monitored. They're often very difficult to monitor, though. That's a typical sentence or a typical deal in a gun charge such as this. But as Cenk alluded to, there is the partisanship here. It does, I mean, in truth, it is the son of the president, so it brings a lot of questions to the White House. Ian Sams, the White House spokesman, said the president and first lady love their son and support him as he continues to rebuild his life. We will have no further comment, but of course, the president peppered with questions about this, as will people in the administration until the story dies, which will be about 24 hours, I would guess. Joe Biden has said very little, but he was asked questions and he had this simple response.
I'm very proud of my son.
And I mean, Cenk, that's the answer you'd expect, and that's probably the best one for him to give.
Yeah, I don't know. Proud is the right word on today, but it's his son.
Right.
Whenever it's your son, it is what it is, and you're going to defend him, and I expect that. And so I'm not bothered by that. I expect Donald Trump to defend Don Jr., although that's probably less likely. Okay, if we're being honest, and you know it too.
Right.
Okay, so now look, guys, on the charges. Look, when Trump is charged, MAGA says it should be a bar so much higher than if it applied to a middle class person. So for example, if you take the kind of top secret documents that Trump had, and you're a middle class guy who, by the way, was in the military and got the documents because you were part of a classified mission, etc., and you took them home, and then they found out that you had them and you wouldn't give them back, you might be facing 10 to 20 years real prison time, like decades, right? And the Republicans say, yeah, I know, but Trump's one of the elites, and the elites need to be protected, and it's political if you go after him. So make sure the middle class Marine guy goes to prison for as long as possible, but Trump never faces justice. In this case with Hunter Biden, again, I was super open to actual corruption charges, but it turns out he looked and looked and looked, and there weren't any. So he charges this crap? Like, okay, now this is the exact opposite standard. If you're middle class and you didn't pay your taxes for a while, and then you did, they're not going to charge you.
Exactly,
right?
Yeah.
Okay, and on the gun charge, you're middle class, you own a gun, but you didn't report that you were on X, Y, or Z when you filled out the forms. They're not going to charge you. No prosecutor is going to waste his time charging that
in
stuff.
In fact, that law exists, and that codicil to the law exists so that they can get people who are, for the example, white supremacists, organized white supremacists. They can get them on that gun charge because they know that they've been using drugs. If they can't get them on some other charge with their racism and bigotry and all of that, so they hold them on those charges originally. So this is very far-fetched. As a matter of fact, Andrew Weissman, former U.S. attorney, today saying about Hunter Biden, he said, putting it in context, first-time tax offenders like this rarely get prosecuted and even rarer to get jail time. And false gun applications, sadly, almost never get prosecuted or jail time. So this is, if anything, harsh, but not lenient.
Yeah, look, it depends. Here's what it mainly depends on. If he had no evidence of corruption and he went with these weak-ass charges, then it is way overcharging. It's crazy. It's saying, okay, we're gonna get a Democrat's son just to call things even. On the other hand, if he had decent evidence on corruption, but not good enough to prosecute, and Hunter didn't want to take a chance, the prosecutor didn't want to take a chance, and they settled to lesser charges, okay, that's a more normal plea deal. And what this means is, I couldn't really prove the corruption, so I went with this instead.
Well, the corruption is the next chapter, right? I mean, that's what House Republicans are all over. So this is just, basically, this is a tax charge. This could happen to anyone. You said just Joe middle class, doesn't pay his taxes, doesn't have the money for it 1 year, takes the penalty, pays it a few years later. That happens. It's still,
but it never gets charged. That's
it never
crazy
gets charged. That's the thing. It never. The IRS wants their money. They don't want to see you in jail, and no courtroom in America wants to have to deal with that case. So that's part of it. But when you talk about the idea that it's the corruption, that's what people in the House are so consumed with, and Republicans are still furious about this. Right? They think that this is an uneven justice. That Hunter Biden got away with something. Here's James Comer of Kentucky, the Republican leading the House Oversight Committee. We've seen a lot from him, and this is a statement put out by his office today. Let's be clear, the Department of Justice's charges against President Biden's son Hunter reveal a two-tiered system of justice. Hunter Biden is getting away with a slap on the wrist when growing evidence uncovered by the House Oversight Committee reveals the Bidens engaged in a pattern of corruption, influence peddling, and possibly bribery. Right? So this is the politicization of this, right? You have one idea here that he's being charged with something that nobody ever gets, or he got a deal instead of being charged for something that nobody ever gets charged for, and Republicans are fuming about it. Comer goes on, these charges against Hunter Biden and sweetheart plea deal have no impact on the Oversight Committee's investigation. We will not rest until the full extent of President Biden's involvement in the family schemes are revealed. And that's the stuff about which the Republicans are so hung up. Kevin McCarthy standing by his deputy today, speaking with reporters at the Capitol.
My first reaction is it continues to show the two-tier system in America. If you are the president's leading political opponent, the DOJ tries to literally put you in jail and give you prison time. If you are the president's son, you get a sweetheart deal. Now, this does nothing to our investigation. It actually should enhance our investigations because the DOJ should not be able to withhold any information now, saying that because of pending investigation, they should be able to provide Chairman Comer with any information that he requires.
Remember, this is a Trump-appointed prosecutor given total authority to go and do his own thing, total autonomy on this case by the Attorney General Merrick Garland, and that's what they came up with. And you have people saying this was very harsh, maybe because of that, but Republicans don't think it was harsh enough, Jay.
Yeah, so look, I'm going to defend their politics, but rip their head off on policy, rhetorically, of course. So first on the hypocrisy issue, look, if this happened, for example, to Don Jr., what do you think Kevin McCarthy and the Republican reaction would be? But they're going after him for paying his taxes. He already paid it, and they're still going to try to prosecute him. Oh, for guns, they're trying to take his guns away. Now they say he can't have guns for the rest of his life. This is a second administration here. And guys, even if you're the most hardcore MAGA, you know that I'm right. You know that would be the reaction you would have if it was Don Jr., right? And if we talked about corruption, but they couldn't prove it, but we're still talking about corruption? You'd be like, they couldn't prove it. We told you it was a witch hunt. We told you, right? All right, so I get it. You guys don't care about facts, right? So I'm not gonna debate people who are serial liars and lie on purpose. So Kevin McCarthy's useless here. So now the difference between the committee and the court. So they're like, oh, we're gonna pursue the corruption potential in the committees. Yeah, but Republicans are massive liars. I don't trust them at all. I think Hunter Biden might have been corrupt. I mean, look, guys, there's the bottom line of, did he do influence peddling? Without Joe Biden, because apparently, not apparently, we showed you, the laptop shows Joe Biden was not involved, okay? But did Hunter Biden peddle his influence as in, my last name is Biden and I'd like a seat on this Ukrainian gas company? Yeah, he definitely did that, right? And it's definitely not cool. And so I was genuinely curious, but is it a crime, right? Do you have evidence of money exchanging hands, maybe influencing Joe Biden? Then I would care a lot. And I'm not MAGA, I have total open mind on it. The guy, a Trump guy, looks and looks and looks and looks and doesn't find anything. So now a bunch of Yahoo liars on a committee are gonna pretend they found something?
Right.
No. Congress is for BS, the court system is for evidence. You had your shot in the court system and you came up with a donut. Zero.
And not to mention that, going to your scenario with peddling his own name, you could be on that Ukrainian gas company board and say, let's get Hunter Biden. Let's not tell him we're getting him because he's Hunter Biden. He probably knows it intuitively. Let's go get him because his name's Hunter Biden. And it's not Hunter Biden saying, my dad's the vice president. So, I mean, it totally goes both ways. Before we break here, I want to talk about what Donald Trump himself had to say. And I should also add that Donald Jr. and Ivanka Trump, because Donald Trump's lawyer gave money to Cyrus Vance in New York in 2012, were able to get out of a charge that they were inflating numbers in the Trump Hotel building. So there are favors done all the time in the justice system, and that's one that you could take a look at. That was Kasowitz, his lawyer, giving $25,000 to Cyrus Vance at that time, the DA in New York, his campaign, so that they would not prosecute, well, presumably so they would not prosecute Donald and Ivanka. Vance gave the money back, but they never did prosecute them because they were small charges like these were against Hunter Biden. The former president today took to Truth Social saying the Hunter-Joe Biden settlement is a massive cover-up. We're in all caps here, and full-scale election interference scam, the likes of which has never been seen in our country before, a traffic ticket, quotes, and Joe is all cleaned up and ready to go into the 2024 presidential election. And this as crooked DOJ state and city prosecutors, Marxists and communists all hit me from all sides, and he meant to say angles, but he wrote angels with bull blank, make America great again. So, of course, he's fired up about this. He's the one who's going to always politicize things. He thinks he's unfair. He's a martyr to the legal system.
I think that he just glorified DOJ prosecutors there more than anyone else ever has. Angels riding on bulls. Yeah. Galloping in. Okay. Okay. All right. Last thing for me is, look, on the politics, why do I give the Republicans credit? Because they are always maximalist. They always take it turns out trumped up, ridiculous, nonsense charges against Hunter Biden, and you make it seem like it's the biggest thing on earth. And they're like, oh my God, the corruption. And people don't read the details of indictments, etc. Do they actually read the entire story or watch the whole video to make sure? A lot of you have, obviously, right? But a ton of people don't. They just see the headlines. And as long as the Republicans are screaming, he definitely did it, when the evidence shows he apparently didn't do it, they come out even. And then when Trump does something over the top and obviously illegal, they're like, he didn't do it. And then you see headlines, he didn't do it and he did do it, and it comes out relatively even. And so it's good politics, but understand, you should never trust a word that comes out of a Republican politician's mouth. They're all proven liars. The rest of that committee will be nothing but horse crap, and I have no interest in it, and I will not listen to anything that they claim as evidence when all they do is make things up. When you go to court, whether it's Trump pretending he had evidence of fraud in the 2020 election, or Hunter Biden, or any of these stories, all of a sudden, the Republicans can't ever find any evidence. You know why? Because they were always lying. All right, we got to take a break. Speaking of always lying, Donald Trump. Now, he's on Bret Baier. he does this disastrous interview filled with lies and oftentimes hilarious lies. But the one time he told the truth, oh, that could be devastating. We'll share when we come back. All right, back on TYT, Cenk and Michael with you guys. So we've got a lot more, including now an instant classic, the Bret Baier Donald Trump interview. Michael's got that. So
you're not going to hear enough about this, but it's going to go out throughout the next entire cycle of the election. Last night, Donald Trump went and sat down with Fox News Bret Baier, the anchor from Fox, and it was a series of lies, not surprising, but I guess surprising where it was, and surprising to the pushback from a Fox anchor. Let's hear how we'll go right into Bret Baier talking about exactly what Donald Trump was saying about the 2020 election, because Donald Trump, as you know, says that this election was rigged.
First of all, I won in 2020 by a lot, okay? Let's get that straight. I won in 2020.
Right, okay, so that, of course, was Donald Trump. He used to be the president of the United States. This was right before Joe Biden. It was not Bret Baier, but sitting across from him was Bret Baier, and this is Bret Baier's reaction to Donald Trump's claims, as I mentioned, of a rigged election.
You take a look at Truth to Vote, where they have people stuffing the ballot boxes on tapes, or let's go to recent. Well, wait a minute. Let's go to recent. FBI Twitter. Let's go to recent. The 51 agents, all corrupt stuff, Bret.
Understand about the Hunter Biden,
no, but
all
that's cheating
fair
on the election.
But
that's cheating on the election.
You lost the 2020 election.
Bret, you take a look at all of the stuffed ballots. You take a look at all of the things, including things like the 51 intelligence agents.
There were recounts in all of the swing states. There was not significant widespread.
We're trying to get recounts, real recounts, not just numbers of votes.
Widespread corruption. There was not a sense of that. There were lawsuits, more than 50 of them, by your lawyers, some in front of judges that you appointed.
Look at Wisconsin.
That came out with no evidence.
Wisconsin has practically admitted it was rigged. Other states are doing the same right now, and it's continuing on.
There have been reviews of every potential case of voter fraud in 6 battleground states, and they found fewer than 475 cases.
You know why? Because they didn't look at the right things.
Okay, are you going to be
They were counting ballots, not the authenticity of the ballot. The ballots were fake ballots.
Wow. I spent a good deal of time for this network and other ones in the field talking to Trump supporters, and they sound just like, you'll be shocked to know, Donald Trump. You don't get to hear him talk much about the election anymore, other than just calling it a rigged election whenever he gets on a stage. He doesn't go as deep as he did there with Bret Baier, but it's exactly what I hear from these voters in the field, Cenk. People who are saying that, they were counting, making things up, like it's not about the ballots, it's the fake ballots, saying that Wisconsin has practically admitted. Here's some news. Wisconsin has not come close to admitting anything about fraud. What they did is they recounted and they recertified, and they did all the things which the other 49 states are required to do, which is count the ballots, make sure that they are authentic. There were, a handful. There was a handful of fraud, mostly hurting Republicans who were not registered, people not registered voting for Republicans. That was it. So Donald Trump sounds just like the people that he wants to follow.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's embarrassing, right? So he's like, they might have won on the ballots, but we won on the stuffed ballots and the stuffed peppers. We had them all. We had 51 lawyers. No, you had no answer. Bret Baier, host on Fox News, says to you, you had over 50 cases where your lawyers got to present evidence and you presented zero evidence because there is no evidence. So you can tell me all about the stuffed peppers and the banana peppers now, okay? But that doesn't make any difference. But this lunatic's still talking about we're gonna get new recounts. How many years? It's like 3 years later, dude. Like, you're not gonna get any more recounts. Georgia recounted like 12 times. It's hyperbole, but not by much. They did a hand recount. I mean, like, they had Trump's and recount. They did 100 recounts in all these states. You had all of the.
And what he says about Wisconsin that I just said is such a lie. They are not they have not come close to admitting anything because there's nothing to admit. They gave the results of that election and Joe Biden won. I mean, it's astonishing. Trump has yet, Cenk, to be held accountable for this. We have not, and maybe he'll be held accountable in 2024. We have yet to see. Bret Baier is certainly going to be held accountable, but by I think unfortunately, by a lot of the people that support Donald Trump. But Bret Baier going to a Trump rally is going to be an interesting thing after this election. But one person, and it ties to a little bit of news today, that is being held accountable or possibly accountable is John Eastman. You'll recall he's the one who was a lawyer for the president, the former president at the time, and he tried to convince Mike Pence. He's the one who went in to try and convince the vice president at that time not to certify the election. Now it's John Eastman who has to sit before the California Legal Board to try and save his law license and save himself from being disbarred. John Eastman set to face disciplinary hearings starting today in Los Angeles. The counsel for the State Bar of California is asking the court to revoke Eastman's license to practice law in the state. Eastman faces 11 disciplinary charges. The disciplinary hearings before the state bar court seeking Eastman's disbarment are expected to last at least 8 days. The court will determine whether Eastman's conduct qualifies for recommendation of a suspension or revocation of his law license. The fate of Eastman's law license then falls into the hands of the California Supreme Court. So you have somebody at least answering for a little bit of this rigged election stuff, Cenk.
Yeah. Well, look, I'm mixed on this case, and you might be surprised by that. So why am I mixed? So Eastman was one of the worst in this fake elector scam that I think was the real coup. So I think there's a case to be made that he should be charged criminally. But there's two buts there. Number one, they should all be charged. Peter Navarro, Steve Bannon, Donald Trump, all the people who took, Rudy Giuliani that took part in the fake elector scheme. Actually, I'm not positive Giuliani did. They'd have to prove that in court, et cetera, right? So why are they going after Eastman, but they're not going after the guys who actually came up with the plot? He was in essence, the lawyer for the plot, right? Well, because going after them criminally, everybody's gonna cry. The Republicans are gonna cry, the MAGA's gonna cry, and then Christopher Wray, now the head of the FBI, is a Republican, and they were already crying about him, so now he says, well, we're not really gonna go after them on those charges. Now, Jack Smith, the special counsel, still might do it. So I think that it makes sense to go after them all on the actual case. This is taking away his law license. It's kind of and it's very important to his life, obviously, but not a criminal charge, so it's a little bit different. Now, as a lawyer, I actually think he has the best argument out of all of those guys that I just named, because he gets to say, well, they asked me, how can I justify, this political position? And I gave him a legal theory. It was a tenuous one, and I said in the documents that it was tenuous.
Well, let's go to the tenuousness. I mean, it was, you can't use the word trumped up anymore, but it was fabricated stuff that he was giving to the vice president of the United States, who is the only person who can certify a national election. So that goes against what any bar in any of the 50 states could possibly say, right?
Yeah, so that to me is the key. If they have him saying something that is provably not true and he knows is not true, okay, which they might, because in one of the documents he says, basically there's a quote, near zero chance that he's right. Okay, so well, but on the other hand, if I'm his lawyer, I go, well, he said it, didn't he? He said I have a near zero chance of being right. So then it's up to the politicians to take what he's basically admitting in the document is a lie and see if they can make that lie work.
But Greg Jacob, who was Vice President Pence's lawyer at the time, is testifying against Eastman in Sacramento or wherever they're doing. No, I guess it's Los Angeles, and in front of the state bar, because he's saying that he was being supplied and advised by a lawyer to the president with false information. And that's the crux of why this person's being disbarred. It also doesn't mean that he's not going to be charged criminally at a later time. I don't think it's going to happen. But this is independent of justice. This is just the State Bar of California.
So in summation, if they can prove that he lied, yeah, you get disbarred for that, right? And so I'm glad that they're going through the proceeding. If I was part of the proceedings, I would keep an open mind on whether they could prove that he lied on purpose with intent, etc. But really, instead of charging the lawyer for the criminal conspiracy, you should charge the guys who did the conspiracy in the first place, and that's Trump and Navarro, etc. But that's too, politically incorrect. So they're not going to do that. Instead, they're going to disbar him. And by the way, last thing on it, I thought well, I don't know, if we're disbarring this guy, can you disbar John Yoo, the guy who wrote the torture memos, also filled with lies, encouraging the politicians to break the law, which torture was against the law. And then it turns out John Yoo's testifying for Eastman. It's I don't know, wait. Does that help him make his case? Look, this guy's a criminal too, and he didn't get disbarred. I doubt that's what he's gonna say, but it's an interesting witness for the defense. Let's put it that way.
Working against Eastman is the fact that he's got to go before the California bar and not, say, Oklahoma. If Cenk is right and the lies start from the head down, well, the lies continue from the head down with Bret Baier interviewing Donald Trump last night. Trump talking about the classified documents that were found at Mar-a-Lago.
The only way NARA could ever get this back, would be please, could we have it back?
And they
please,
asked for that.
Because they have no.
They did ask for it.
No,
and they said, "Can you give the documents back?"
And we were talking.
And then they said they went to DOJ to subpoena you to get them
which
back.
they've never done before.
Right.
And
but why not just hand them over then?
Because I had boxes. I want to go through the boxes and get all my personal things out. I don't want to hand that over to NARA yet. And I was very busy, as you've sort of seen.
Yeah, but according to the indictment, you then tell this aide to move to other locations after telling your lawyers to say you'd fully complied with the subpoena when you hadn't.
But before I send boxes over, I have to take all of my things out. These boxes were interspersed with all sorts of things.
Interspersed with all sorts of things, Cenk.
Oh boy. Okay, that's awesome. Ladies and gentlemen, we got him. Or more accurately, he got himself. That was a confession.
Yeah, I mean, Jack Smith has to be looking at this saying, oh my God, this is good, right?
Yeah. No, if you're not a lawyer, you might be thinking, well, I don't know, it sounds like one of his normal BS excuses. He wanted to get to send the documents later because he's worried about his golf pants that were in there, right? But no, wait, this is not about that. He's going to go to court and there's a very specific charge against him, and he just admitted to the specifics of those charges. So he said, he admitted that he had the classified documents, already mental. We know that he had them, right? But you shouldn't admit that. You should have your lawyer go, oh, he didn't know they were classified. He didn't know. He thought maybe they were all golf pants. There's like a million excuses you could have unless the moron client admits on national TV. But that's the small part. The large part is, so yeah, I didn't give him back. Oh my God, you just admitted it. That's a full-blown confession. No, your lawyer could have done 1,000 things to prevent you from admitting that you purposely, with intent, did not give back the documents. Your weakest defense is, well, I had a good reason for breaking the law. I had a good reason for not returning it according to the law when I was supposed to return it. But there's a legal subpoena that you, even putting aside the records and how important the documents were, there's a subpoena saying, give us those documents. You must legally give them to us.
And he says it's never been done before. Right?
Yeah.
So all he does when he's on the campaign trail is saying nobody's ever done anything like this before. But when it's being done to him, totally different, right?
Yeah.
And Baier says that doesn't matter. That doesn't matter.
Yeah, so there's some other charges that he's charged with that he didn't directly confess to there, but a whole heap of them, including obstruction of justice, now is going to be incredibly simple to prove.
Right.
So, but look, you can't fix stupid. They used to have this thing with David Letterman at the end of the clips about his show. It would say, there's no off switch on genius, right? I always thought it was a little unbearable, but okay. With Trump, there's no off switch on idiot. Okay, so he just goes up, verbal diarrhea, I did it.
And you wonder why lawyers keep quitting on this guy. Can you imagine if you were representing this guy and your client goes on TV and does this? I mean, it's incredible. He couldn't find a lawyer in Florida, you'll recall, last week for the arraignment itself. He couldn't find a Florida attorney, and this is exactly why, because he just goes out there. He continued, of course, and what he always does is compare himself to others. The unfair treatment he's getting, like a 7-year-old in the schoolyard. Here he's talking about the documents found at Mar-a-Lago, comparing them to the documents found at President Biden's home.
Everything was declassified because I had the right to declassify. You want to talk about a mess? Take a look at Biden, where he's got 1,850 boxes. He has boxes stored in Chinatown in D.C. He has boxes stored at Penn Center, and he has boxes under his Corvette and around his Corvette sitting in a garage for years where it was very seriously classified. Obama had it. Nixon had it. Carter had it. The Bushes had it.
These are super sensitive national security documents.
I'm sure you'll see real super sensitive that Biden has, because Biden has far more than anybody's ever kept.
And he turned them over when asked.
No, he didn't. He still hasn't given the 1,850 boxes that's stored at the University of Delaware. In fact, they're fighting them in court, and they're fighting them. And
but he opened up for them to look at it.
Excuse me. The boxes from Chinatown, he didn't turn them over. He sent them up to his lawyer in Boston to look at before they handed him over.
And there are special counsel that's looking at that, and we'll see what comes out of it. But I do want to just end with this. I don't want to dwell.
Man, he really hates China. Everything that he can blame on China, anytime he can stick China in there, he does it. But of course, a lot of what he just said, Cenk, is not true.
No, not at all. So look, at least he didn't say it this time. 2 different times, and nobody even notes it anymore because everybody knows that Donald Trump is so over the top racist. It's not even an issue. The last 2 times he talked about the so-called boxes in Chinatown, he was like, and they don't even speak English there in Chinatown. That's absurd. Of course, Chinese Americans speak English, you moron, you bigoted fool. But okay, let's get back to the documents. So he says the 1,850 boxes, not true. Of course, right? Also not true that they don't speak English in Chinatown. Everything he says is not true. But the most important part of his lies there is Biden and Pence, when all this document stuff happened, went and on their own decided, hey, look, there's documents that we've sent to official places. That's some of which Trump mentions there, but he doesn't mention, no, they're guarded and they're official and they're supposed to be there, right? But they found some that weren't, including Pence, but they found it themselves. They did the search. And then they voluntarily handed them over. They weren't asked to hand, they just said, hey, look, we did a search and we found some too, and here we're sending them back to you. That is not a little different, that's massively different than the crime that Trump just admitted, which is the government says, hey, you have not like mementos and stuff that those other guys found. You have the biggest top secrets we have, including our nuclear secrets, our defenses, in a best case scenario, lying around Mar-a-Lago in a ballroom anybody can walk into, right? Give them back. And he goes, no, I'm not going to. I'm gonna look for my golf pants. I think he wasn't looking for his golf pants. I think he was looking for a giant check from a foreign country. But
certainly waiting for it. And even if he wasn't, the fact that he could have been is unbelievable. And it's like, if you find a wallet and you turn it in, you've done the right thing. For a while, you had that wallet and you shouldn't have had it. Perhaps it was somebody else's. I don't know. But that's what the argument Trump's making here. And then finally, there was this recording of Donald Trump waving a top secret document around. This is what the former president had said, Bret Baier.
According to the indictment, you were here at Bedminster on July 21st, 2021, after you're no longer president, and you were recorded saying that you had a document detailing a plan of attack on another country that was prepared by the US military for you when you were president. The Iran attack plan, you remember that? Ready? You were recorded.
It wasn't a document.
Okay.
I had lots of paper. I had copies of newspaper articles. I had copies of magazines.
I know. This is specifically a quote. You're quoted on the recording saying the document was secret, adding that you could have declassified it while you were president, but quote, now I can't. This is still secret, highly confidential. And the indictment cites the recording and the testimony from people in the room saying you showed it to people there that day. So you say on tape.
It says just the opposite.
That you can't declassify. declassified, so why have it?
When I said that I couldn't declassify it now, that's because I wasn't president. I never made any bones about that. When I'm not president, I can't declassify.
And that's what you said. You didn't declassify it.
I said no. I said I couldn't. But that wasn't a document, Brett. There was no document. That was a massive amount of papers and everything else talking about Iran and other things. And it may have been held up or may not, but that was not a document. I didn't have a document per se.
There was no document. I was holding up papers. They were not documents. Donald Trump is desperate here. And again, Cenk, I think this is Exhibit B in Jack Smith's repertoire.
100%. Look, the one he was most dead to rights on is the one that they're talking about here, because he's on tape saying, here's a secret document that's highly classified. Now he's saying, it wasn't a document, and it wasn't highly classified. It was newspapers or other papers. No one believes that, partly because he's on tape saying the exact opposite. I mean, look.
And also acknowledging that he couldn't declassify it anymore, nodding his head there, because he wasn't president anymore, and only the president can declassify these.
If he was a regular defendant, right now he'd be pleading to about 20 years, okay? And every lawyer would try to get him to just get only 20 years in prison, okay? So I know he's gonna try to get it, like if he wins the election, he just pardoned himself. If he loses the election, I wouldn't be surprised if a Democrat pardoned him. But that's the only thing that's gonna save him, because he's toast in court. Like before, a lot of talk about like, oh, they could get him, blah, blah, blah. No, he did it to himself. Absolutely, utterly toast.
And there'll be more cases and more potential pardons. This is not the end of the rope, end of the line.
Yep. All right, we got to take a quick break. We'll be right back. All right, back on TYT, Cenk and Michael with you guys. And I'm gonna read one super chat here because it's fun. Brickhouse Mama wrote in, Cenk, you are a swarthy Turkish god of a man with amazing hair. Michael's cute too.
Right, I was shooting for a swarthy Turkish guy and I didn't get it.
Well, better luck next time.
I'll settle for cute.
Yeah, better luck. All right, what's next?
Here's what's next, the former president.
We put people in that were great, and we put people in that weren't. I now know Washington probably better than anybody. I know the good ones and the bad ones, and we will have really great, strong people. I already know who they are, but we will have really great, strong people.
Okay, in 2016 you said that. I'm going to surround myself with only the best and most serious people.
Yeah, and you know, while I was prepping for this, I was thinking about some of the people in the administration. Bret Baier, we'll hear from him in a second, talking about some of the ones that are running against him and others. But Tom Price at HHS had to resign, took $900,000. Scott Pruitt, all kinds of travel and other, he had to resign, travel and other violations. Michael Flynn, we know, he pleaded guilty to lying, had to be pardoned. Paul Manafort, Rick Gates, Rob Porter worked in the White House, had abused ex-wives and had to leave the White House. George Papadopoulos, Wilbur Ross, who had fraud, millions of dollars of fraud in business outside the White House, still answering for it. Steve Bannon, we didn't even get to. Bill Shine, who was at Fox News and at the time when all of those sexual harassment allegations were there. The list just goes on, and Bret Baier has more.
Your Vice President, Mike Pence, is running against you.
Yeah.
Your Ambassador to the United Nations, Nikki Haley, she's running against you. Your former Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, said he's not supporting you. You mentioned National Security Advisor John Bolton. He's not supporting you either. You mentioned Attorney General Bill Barr, says you shouldn't be president again, calls you a consummate narcissist and troubled man. You recently called Barr a gutless pig. Your second Defense Secretary is not supporting you, called you irresponsible. This week, you and your White House called your White House Chief of Staff, John Kelly, weak and ineffective and born with a very small brain. You called your acting White House Chief of Staff, Mick Mulvaney, a born loser. You called your first Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson, dumb as a rock. And your first Defense Secretary, James Mattis, the world's most overrated general. You called your White House Press Secretary, Kayleigh Kennedy, milquetoast. And multiple times you've referred to your Transportation Secretary, Secretary Elaine Chao as Mitch McConnell's China-loving wife. So why did you hire all of them in the first place?
Because I hired 10 to 1 that were fantastic.
Damn. I mean, that was unbelievable. He just went through a list of people, and actually some of the people in there were probably the finest people that in his administration. I mean, wow.
Yeah, so look, I've been saying this for years. If you were gonna hire the greatest people, why did you hire all these people that you now call losers? I started saying that about a year into his administration because he'd already fired so many people. And after he fires them, he's like, "Dad, there's a pig rolling in mud. I hate him. Tiny little brain," right? Well, then why'd you hire the tiny little brain guy? Like what you couldn't tell in the job interview? What does that make you? I guess that makes you a tinier little brain, isn't it? Okay, so, and this is the guy who said, "I'm amazing at business. I'm the best manager. I'm the best manager." Do you look like the best manager? I mean, that's unreal. Look, from time to time, you'll have things that go sideways. It happens, right? It happens in other administrations too, and you gotta let go of some people. This is unlike any other administration. I've been covering politics now, unfortunately, for a quarter of a century, okay? And I've gone through all these different administrations, and they had their little hiccups here and there. Look, things with Trump are so crazy that any one of these would have been the biggest scandal in another administration. If Barack Obama had a giant falling out with Eric Holder, his attorney general, and they called him a pig afterwards. And Holder said Obama's like a petulant child and definitely broke the law. I mean, it would be heads exploding. People would talk about that for decades. But with Trump, there's dozens and dozens of these. So which one do you keep up with? No, there's no way around it. There's no either. Trump, even by his own standards, Trump is the world's worst manager.
I mean, there's no question about that, and also you wouldn't have a president before Trump saying that he only has the best people, right? I mean, they don't talk about it; they just go ahead and they do the business of the country. Bret Baier went on, or it wasn't Bret Baier who went on. So you talked about his management skills and Trump's management skills. So too did Chris Christie, a former friend, a former enemy, then a former friend, and now an opponent in the 2024 Republican primary. Here's Chris Christie.
Well, look, Jake, I stood on the stage in 2016 and heard Donald Trump say he would only hire the very, very best people and he would know how to manage them. But think about what happens here. Here's what he says about Rex Tillerson when he gets in. He says he's the embodiment of the American dream, former CEO of ExxonMobil. He said when he left, here's what he said about him. He's dumb as a rock and lazy as hell. About General Mattis, 4-star General Mad Dog Mattis, he said he was our very best general and that he was the closest thing we had to Patton. When he left, he said he was the most overrated general in American history. Now look, either Donald Trump, if you believe what he said when they left, that means he didn't pick the very best people and doesn't know how to pick personnel. If you believe what he said at the beginning, the great stuff, then this guy is the worst manager in the history of the American presidency.
Who rates generals? That's what I want to know. Where are they being overrated, these generals? Again, I mean, this is Chris Christie, who knows him pretty well, talking about exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah, no, I'm in a fantasy armed forces league. And,
right.
Yeah, and I had Mattis in the second round, but when Trump hyped him up, I had to panic and I got him in the wrap in the first round.
Right, well, I got Petraeus and it killed me.
Well, I don't blame you. Okay, so listen, guys. On Chris Christie, he starts the talking points. This is a new thing, okay? So that was before the Bret Baier interview. So, and look, let's be honest. Mainstream media and Chris Christie are tag teaming. Not mainstream media, corporate media, because right-wing media is also involved, okay? They're all tag teaming against Trump. Let's keep it real. And now they're they're finally saying the things they should have said years ago, right? But Chris Christie was his lapdog earlier, slobbering around on the set behind him when he was running in 2016 and was bitter that he didn't get picked in the administration, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm giving you all of the context. But, and And Chris Christie is put up by corporate donors, etc. All the context and being super fair and honest about it. Now, having said that, Christie's actually tough. So he goes, I don't know why these idiots aren't saying it. Hey, he fired everyone. And then he called them idiots afterwards. So who's the idiot who hired him, right? It's such an obvious point. And like I said, we've been making it on the Young Turks for now maybe 5 years straight at least, right? But once Christie says it, it then cascades throughout the media and eventually gets to Baier asking Trump about it. And then he looks bad, and he looks bad in front of a Fox News audience. Look, I think Chris Christie now has gone from 0 to a little bit of a chance because he's the only one who's actually fighting Trump.
Well, people are saying he's the only Republican in the race, like clear, old-fashioned Republican, or old-fashioned by meaning 2014. And so I think that's what can help him. Clearly, he's a complicated guy in the way he's perceived. Also, the way he's running. He's going after Ron DeSantis harder than he's going after Trump. But to what you were saying, Cenk, is all you have to do is say something about Trump, and it makes these ripples, and everybody's paying attention to it. So that's why people are paying attention to Chris Christie. For his part, Baier was saying that this was all happening. Trump is saying the only reason that people are actually going after him now is to make money. He cited Alyssa Farah joining the View, the television show, and Bill Barr writing a book. Again, it's kind of weak sauce. He also, Bret Baier pointed out a tweet from DeSantis PAC spokesman Steve Cordes after Trump posted about John Kelly. Cordes said, very serious question, who would work for Trump? Goes to what we were saying about who would represent Trump, right? If he wins, what people of gravity and substance would volunteer to work for his administration, knowing how viciously he's attacked nearly all his former senior staffers? He's spelled viciously like viscously. Again, we have angel and angle, some spelling issues in the former administration. But, he's saying that Trump said, well, I didn't give Cordes what he wanted, so he jumped ship. Again, you're seeing these Trump excusing this, but real points being made. Who would honestly work in a Trump administration? Well, we know who would.
Yeah, he's going to pick like goons and mafiosos, etc., because no real person now is going to volunteer for this. I mean, for so long they were like lambs to the slaughter. They'd all go in thinking, oh, no, I know he looks crazy in public, but privately he's probably a genius. And then they get in and they're like, oh my God, he's worse than he is in public. Total, utter lunatic. And they'd run with their hair on fire, and yet everybody, but back when he was president, they wanted that power and fame. That's the one thing I'll agree with Trump on. All those people that are now all over TV saying, oh yeah, I had my problems with Trump. No, you didn't. When he was president, you loved it and you milked it for power and fame and money.
And that happens in every administration too. People who worked in the Bush administration wrote books that were critical of Bush. People who worked in the Carter administration, same thing. That's what happens. I cut you off, but I think before we leave this, we should give 25 seconds to Bret Baier and what it means that he gave this interview, what it says about Fox. It was a pretty brave interview within his building, more than it was in the world. He did what he should do. Journalists should push back against the truth on Trump. It's never too late to start, and he did it.
Yeah, and I gotta say, I thought Trump was more respectful of Baier than he was of Caitlin Collins. And it might have to do with the fact that he was on Fox, and it might have to do with the fact that he's a white male, right? As opposed to Caitlin Collins, who's a woman, and he loves cutting women off. He tried to cut off Baier a couple of times, but he backed off and let Baier say these long and damaging questions against them. But yes, look, I don't think that the news people on Fox News are straight news people. I think they're still involved in propaganda for the Republican Party. And he did say throughout the interview, oh, your defenses are fair, right?
Yeah.
So
I mean, he's not a hero, but he did something we don't see people do.
Yeah,
and I think that's important.
No, but that's a long wind up to, I'll take it.
Yeah.
And that's a lot better than almost everyone else on Fox News. And he asked them some really hard questions that Trump had terrible answers for. So credit where credit is due. And in this case, Bret Baier earned.
Yeah, our friend Jim Avila, who Cenk and I know, wrote a piece today in Barrett's News Service about just that. People, the journalists that should push back. It's Jim Avila, ABC, Twitter. I urge you to do it, not just because he's a friend, but it's a great article about it.
Yeah, okay, we are out of time, but that submarine story.
Yeah.
Oh well, okay, so we gotta go. Sorry, we got a great hour coming up for you guys, and maybe we'll come back to it in the post game. But Andrew Tate, the charges are against him have been revealed. We're going to talk about that when we return. Thank you, Michael. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
We'll be right back. Thanks for listening to the full episode of The Young Turks. Support our work, listen ad-free, access members-only bonus content, and more by subscribing to Apple Podcasts at apple.co/TYT. I'm your host, Cenk Uygur, and I'll see you soon.